Welcome back to the podcast. Gabe, Giannis, and I, we have a very special guest on the show. I have wanted Nick Freitas on the show for a really long time, and we are honored to have him. You know, Nick, he puts out a ton of content online, and he shares a lot about being a husband, being a father. He has a former military background. He currently serves in the Virginia House of Delegates. But man, he storytells and he shares insight like really no one else I've heard. And on today's podcast, there's a ton to take away in regards to what it means to be a husband and a father.
You know, I say this all the time, but this is one of those guests that I just feel so fortunate that I get to be on this podcast as a co-host. And I mentioned this on the show. I hope a lot of young dads and husbands get to listen to some of this stuff, because you're essentially getting these cheat codes, man, from someone that's been in it. Like 3 kids, one of his daughters just got married, 2 teenagers, and it's just like, he's lived it, man. It's just so much good advice and wisdom from someone that's been so intentional about being a husband and being a father. And, you know, tells really good stories to kind of like bring home what he's talking about. So I really enjoyed this, man. And I know people out there will as well. But also, like you, it was a guest that I've been super excited to have on. So I'm glad this finally happened.
Yeah. You know, I think a great way to summarize for me is that when you look at people that you could take things from, maybe they have certain characteristics. Perhaps sometimes we're talking to entrepreneurs. You want to talk from business or whatnot. When it comes to Nick, I think a great way that it's summarized for me is that, you know, his daughter just got married, and during the, you know, dad-daughter dance, he shares a story about how she said to him, "Hey, you did a good job." And to me, above anything else that he's accomplishing in his life, that to me is something that's inspiring. And it tells me, what can I pick up from Nick so that one day, years from now, I get that exact same experience. And today, I think he does a great job of shining light on what he's done and giving tons of inspiration for us. So I really appreciate Nick being on the show. I really appreciate all of you guys listening to the show. And if you get the same type of value that we have, leave it a rating and review. But even more important than the rating and review, share this podcast with a dad out there. Share this podcast with a parent, because I'm confident that they're going to walk away and be like, man, just a little bit more of pep in their step, a little bit more perspective. And yeah, man, it was super powerful, Gabe. So I'm fired up for this one. Let's dive right into it, huh?
Let's do it.
What's up, Nick? Thank you so much for being on the show. As we talked about earlier, you know, in the intro, you have a great background. Obviously, you're in politics. I want to talk a little bit about how you got into that, but I think a great place to start is you and I were connecting on the podcast the other day, and I've consumed a lot of your content. I think you do a phenomenal job talking about masculinity, but in particular, I think what you do a really great job talking about are these 5 categories that every man or I should say every person should embody. Do you think we could start there? These 5 characteristics, how you incorporate them into your life, and then how you instill them into your children. Because I think that's a great framework for anybody to build off of. So I thought we'd start there.
Sure. Well, no, again, you know, thank you guys for having me on. You know, it was funny because you're right. Like the 5 categories kind of apply to everybody in general. It's not specific to men, but I had somebody ask me once, like, what does it mean when you say like, be a man? What does that mean to you? And I thought, like, well, in simplest terms, being a man, whenever you say that to a man, it always means the same thing. It means suck it up and get the job done, right? It means that despite any, you know, potential discomfort, danger, whatever it is, you're going to keep your word. You're going to live up to your responsibilities. You're going to get the job done. But I started thinking more about like, okay, what does that mean? Like, how do you prepare yourself? How do you set yourself up to be the sort of person that represents? And we kind of came up with 5 categories, right? There was the spiritual side, the intellectual side, the emotional, the physical, and the professional. And all that kind of goes around this idea of understanding who you are, what your responsibilities are, and then being able as a man to protect and provide. But as you said, it equally applies that, you know, men or women, we all have these 5 categories, because like for me, the spiritual side that's kind of your moral foundation. Right. Like, you know, my faith is key to my worldview, my outlook. It's what, you know, provides that source of objective morality, objective truth. It provides a standard, which is not just up to me. It's not up to the majority. I'm not the one just deciding what's right and wrong. There is right and wrong. And my job is to comport with it and to defend that which is true and noble. You know, the intellectual side, you know, you should be able to think well, right? You should be able to think critically and come to logical decisions. The emotional side, this is all about maturity, right? Like, can you keep your emotions under control in dangerous situations? But can you also demonstrate tenderness when it's necessary? Can you effectively demonstrate love and kindness, as well as all the other emotions that men tend to be a little bit more comfortable with? The physical side is, I think men should keep themselves in shape, right? I think this is true of everybody, but it is, if you're going to protect, if you're going to provide, if you're going to embrace those roles that I believe that, God has given us as men, then you should be working to be in the physical shape necessary in order to do those things. Not to mention the fact that the physical also has a huge impact on the emotional, the intellectual, et cetera. It's not just isolated to one category. And then when you look at the professional, that really goes into the idea of all of us have to engage in the economy. And if you're going to provide, then you need to be able to develop necessary capabilities to where you're not just a consumer, you're also a producer, you're a provider. And so when we talk about the professional side, it's what are the capabilities that you are developing that allows you to be able to provide, financially, but also to be able to, to engage in charitable work, to be able to share with others. So those are the 5 categories that we've tried to work out on, like, how do you develop these things and how do you constantly improve in each of these categories in order to become just a more effective, a more capable human being.
Where do you think we're falling the shortest as a society today for young men specifically, maybe?
So that's, interestingly enough, that's the area where I get the most pushback when I answer it. I think it's the spiritual. And I have a lot of people that will tell me, like, look, Nick, I don't need your sky daddy to tell me between right and wrong. I can do this. Right. And I'm like, look, say whatever you want, do whatever you want. Right. It is absolutely true that you can work out certain concepts and ideas while denying the author of those concepts and ideas. Like, so for instance, I can drive a car without knowing anything about an internal combustion engine. I can deny the existence of the internal combustion engine and drive my car just fine until something breaks, right? Until something truly challenges my understanding of the world. So the reason why I think the spiritual is so important, if it's true, right? And I don't just mean go pick a spiritual thing. I mean, understanding that there is such a thing as objective truth and objective morality is critical. All of us live as if there's objective truth and objective morality. And my goal has been, like, how do I understand the author of that? Because I think that provides a firm grounding in your own identity, a firm understanding that things are not right and wrong because you say so. Things are not right and wrong because somebody has the ability to impose it. There is objective truth out there. And I think it's a beautiful thing when we both recognize the author of it, and then live our lives in such a way in order to, again, better reflect that in our own lives. Because ultimately that does become the framework for everything else that you do intellectually, emotionally, physically, or professionally. Like your worldview, everybody has a worldview. Nobody gets out of life without a worldview, right? Everyone has one. The only question is, what is it rooted in? What is it grounded in? And can it defend itself? So I think that's an area where we're failing, young men specifically. And I think what ends up happening from that is you see a lot of competing theories right now on how should men behave. And young men, I think, have been offered 2 very prominent paths right now, both of them bad. One of them is this idea and notion that masculinity is toxic, that it's overly aggressive, competitive, violent, when in reality, those are just traits, right? Violence, competitiveness, aggression, those are morally neutral until we provide a larger context, right? If someone comes up, if you use your strength to rob somebody or hurt somebody or steal somebody's purse and run off with it, that is a negative manifestation of aggression. That's a negative manifestation of violence. If another man steps in and stops that man, that's a positive manifestation. Whoop. Wait 1 second. Sorry.
Nick went dark for a second.
I'm going dark.
He just turns on like night vision goggles and
it all goes green. Like, now I'm going to get into my next point. All right. Do you guys got me back now?
Yeah. You're all
okay, good. So let me back up a little bit. If another guy uses his aggression and his violence to stop that man, that is a positive manifestation of that. But again, we have an entire generation of young men that have been fed this narrative that they're the reason why, people are oppressed, right? They're the problem. Masculine men are the problem with society. It's the patriarchy, everything else. So that's been one narrative that we've fed young men. Another narrative that we fed young men is screw all of that. You need to go be strong and you need to go be capable so you can bed as many women, so you can make as much money, so you can be the top dog, so you can control and run because that's your destiny as a man, right? I would argue, that the actual path of genuine masculinity is to say that no, you are supposed to embrace masculine traits. You are supposed to, leverage that. But you're supposed to leverage it for a noble purpose. And if you don't have a foundation for what determines when something is honorable, when something is noble, when something is good, when something is true, then it become very easy to develop those masculine traits and masculine capabilities, not just to your own benefit and the benefit of your wife or your children or your community or your country, but essentially to hedonism, the quest for pleasure or the quest for power. And there needs to be more voices right now telling young men in a society where young men genuinely feel like they're just being attacked left and right, that no, we need you to be men. We need you to be men. And it sucks that you are growing up in a time where masculinity is being trashed by popular culture, by academia, by the media, by politics, the way it is, because it's truly unique within history that we've seen masculinity attacked the way it is right now. But that's why we need you to be men even more, because the only thing that's going to actually save it is men standing up and saying, I will develop these capabilities. I will develop these attributes, but I will serve a noble purpose. And that's why I'm going to do it.
So Nick, on the spiritual note though, so you're saying, and Gabe, I thought that's a great question in regards to like, which one is, do you guys the pushback from? And I think from a spirituality perspective, what you're talking about masculinity, do you find that those are connected to some type of religion, or do you think that there's a spirituality in terms of, so I guess my question is, do you think young men need to find a faith in a religion, or do you think they need to adhere to some type of, guidelines that maybe their parents taught them? Like, how do you do this without saying that you need to then follow a religion? Or do you think that it does have to be in part following some type of path based on a religion?
Well, so let me put it this way. I don't believe so much in what people sometimes call the noble myth, right? So it's this idea that you need to believe in something higher than yourself. You need to believe in, objective truth, objective morality, but just figure it out. It doesn't matter which one, just pick one. And as long as you're doing like the basic good things and treating others the way you want to be treated, that's sufficient. That doesn't work for me. I'll put it that way. I want to know what's true. And like, I'm a Christian, not simply because, my parents were or anything like that. Like, I went through a time where I really had to question my faith because I wanted to know what was true. And so what I tell people is, look, I'm not, what I try to tell people, and I try to always be respectful about this, is I can tell you all the things that I can believe. I can tell you what's worked in my own life. I can tell you where it's failed in my own life. I cannot separate that from who I believe to be the author of that truth, the author of that nobility. I can't separate those two, which means I can't tell somebody else, oh yeah, as long as you pick something, you'll be fine. I don't believe that. I believe that we should be seeking the truth. Now I have found that, and I believe Christianity to be true. What I will say though, is that I can't compel you to believe that way. I can't coerce you to believe that way. You have to figure out what is true and then go and pursue it. But if someone's asking me what I think that is, well, I'm going to tell them, right? I'm not going to try to come up with, and this is the part where you get the pushback, right? Because I got a ton of people that will say, Nick, I love your message. Can you just leave the God stuff out of it? And my answer back is, no, I can't. I'm sorry, because if I did that, I would be lying to you, or I'd be misrepresenting to you where I found this stuff, right? It would be like showing up and making you an incredible dinner and be like, oh man, where's the cookbook? Like, oh no, I don't want to talk about the cookbook. I don't want to talk about the recipe. I don't want to talk about any about that. I don't want to talk about who did it, because that might be controversial. The truth is controversial. The truth is by definition exclusive. And so the question I don't think should be, how do I come up with a nice message that everybody can get behind no matter what? It should be, how do I tell people what I believe the truth is? And then they can go investigate for themselves, because that's what all of us have to do. None of us get to just say, oh, well, this person told me, right? No. We all will one day, I believe that we will all that one day be responsible for what we did, our actions, what we believed, and how it impacted the way that we treated others and how we lived our lives. So I'm going to be very honest with people about what I think the truth is, and then they can go and pursue that. I'm not going to coerce them, right? But I'm going to be honest.
How did we get there? How did we get to the point where that's the one thing that people want you to, not include in your message? Because you look at these 5 categories, right? And some people would have a problem, but most people wouldn't have a problem with you telling them how to work out, how to, be tender with their daughters. Videos that I really enjoyed as we prep for this podcast, how to be professional and how to, protect, provide, how to, what books should you read for the intellectual side? Like, no one would have a problem with you giving those recommendations. Why is it so different when you get to the spiritual side? Why is there that knee-jerk reaction of like, hey, love your message, please keep this out of it?
Because it is the one that requires the most accountability. There's nothing controversial about telling people to develop their mind. It's starting to become more controversial to tell people to, develop their body, right? With the body positivity movement and everything. But, and it's generally not controversial to tell people they should be, capable and be able to provide for themselves and be a responsible adult. And there's certainly nobody that I know of that has a problem with anybody saying you should be emotionally mature and you should be able to develop your ability to effectively communicate and control yourself. But when we get to the spiritual, now we're talking about the source of why all of that is either good or bad, positive or negative. And there's consequences there that exist on a very real level. And I think a lot of people feel like that is the issue that is not as obvious, that it is more controversial because there's arguably more opinions on whether or not that actually is the source of truth. And so I think that hits people in a far more personal way. I think there's usually a lot more baggage associated with it. If you grew up in an environment where it was a particular faith, or you had an experience that impacted you in a way that convinced you that you were never going to touch that again, and you don't want to be told, that you have to follow that, because for you, that faith is not about your relationship with God. That is about that pastor that did something to you. That is about that father who wasn't there, or who was abusive, or that mother that was overbearing. That ends up becoming the representation of the spiritual far more than that translates into the professional or the intellectual or the emotional. You might have a boss that treats you like trash, but you don't come to the conclusion that, that boss treated me like trash, therefore developing professional capabilities that are highly marketable is bad, right? Like you don't make that same connection, but people do make that connection when it comes to the spiritual, because ultimately you are talking about the fundamental source of right and wrong, truth, untruth, and there's authority with it. And if all the authority figures in your life that were associated with a particular faith or a particular belief system were people that you didn't feel like you could trust, or that hurt you, or that abused you, well, then it's not hard to see why that person transfers the negative experience they had with the people in their lives that were espousing that particular faith with the faith itself, or with God himself. And so I think that's why it's very controversial. But by the same token, we've raised a generation, multiple generations now, where we said it's not polite to talk about religion or politics. Well, it turns out that it's pretty important for people to understand those two things, right? It's pretty important for people to have a grasp on it, because one way or another, those two things are going to have an impact on your life. that would be my guess. I don't want to presume too much, but that would be my guess on why that's the most controversial, is because it has the most consequences associated with it.
Man, I hadn't thought about it through that lens. Like we say, hey, don't talk about religion and politics because they're these polarizing subjects, right? But then if you never talk about it. So speaking of that, one of the things I found to be really impactful when, talking to you earlier is that obviously your daughter just got married. She got married pretty young, and you seem to love your son-in-law. And I want nothing more for my daughter than to one day meet a man who like I love and she loves, and like, dude, that would be incredible. That's just such a phenomenal thing. I told you that earlier. Like, I'm so happy for you. Yeah. But how do you raise the children with this idea of spirituality and faith? And what have you done that you think that you've done well to set them up with that as a foundation for other parents to kind of lean on?
Well, so right off the bat, all of us live as if there's objective right and wrong. Even the people that deny that there's such a thing as right and wrong, right? Everyone acts as if there is. And from the earliest moment as a parent, you are educating your child. Initially, it's so they don't kill themselves, right? Like, because especially little boys, man, that's the crazy part. Like I have 2 daughters and a son, and when they're little, the girls were just so much easier because they were far less likely to just, I'm going to go play in traffic, right? I'm going to go climb this dresser and see if I can, crack my head open like my son did. But like from the very beginning, you are sitting there and you're corralling your child and you're showing your child affection and you're loving your child, but you're also bringing correct. Don't do that, right? Like don't bite, don't hit. Well, every time you do that, you're making a moral pronouncement on why it is good or bad to do something. Right. And it's not just don't do that because it could hurt you, or don't do it because you don't want someone to do it to you. It's like, no, don't do it because it's wrong. And as your kid gets a little bit older, that increases, right? So when they're very little, it's like, don't do it because mommy and daddy say so, because they lack the cognitive ability to understand anything other than reward and, consequence, reward and punishment, right? Consequences. But as they start to get a little bit older, you move into that realm of explaining, this is why something is wrong. This is why you shouldn't do this. And a big part of what we taught our kids was, you don't just do this because you wouldn't want it to be done to you. That's a good rule. It's a good goal, right? Treat others the way you would like to be treated. But by the same token, you're not just doing it because you have a selfish inclination that, well, if I don't do this to you, you won't do it to me, and then I'll be better off. And so that's sufficient reason. No, you shouldn't do it to that other person because they're also a human being and they have value, right? And even if they would do it to you, you still shouldn't do it to them because they have value and it's wrong. It's objectively wrong. And so you go through the process of explaining to your children why that is, right? And our faith factored in at the foundation of that argument, of that discussion. That it's not just wrong because you wouldn't want to do it to you. It's wrong because it is objectively wrong.
All right, we're going to take a quick pause from the podcast here to talk about the Train Hard app and everything we have coming up in the month of August. So we just launched a SAND program. So for anyone that's just been on the fence about joining and doesn't quite have the access to the equipment, maybe you don't have the time, the space to dive into Force Flex and the other programs that are a part of the Train Hard app, we've taken away all the excuses. We now have a program. It's 10 weeks, 4 workouts per week that require one piece of equipment alone that you can also get right on the Train Hard shop. We are making it so easy. We partnered up with GoRuck. We have their sandbags available on the Train Hard shop. These things are so durable. It's going to last you for years and years. So you should feel good about making the investment with such a versatile piece of fitness equipment that you can also take with you on trips so that you have no excuses and you never let your momentum get to zero. So the SAND program is 10 weeks, 4 workouts per week. There are intervals, there's mixed modal days, there's longer conditioning days, there are short, spicy workouts. You get a little bit of everything so that in those 10 weeks, you can absolutely improve your fitness, improve your conditioning, improve your body composition with a program that's so simple and only requires one piece of equipment. So if you've been on the fence, you now don't have an excuse. grab the Sand program from the Train Hard shop. It's also available as part of the Train Hard app. So if you're on the Train Hard app and you just want to change things up, boom, you have access to Sand there. We also have a new cycle coming up in Flex that is going to get you so strong. So we have nothing but good things coming here in the month of August. Check out the Train Hard app, check out the Train Hard shop, check out the Sand program. Let's get back to the podcast.
Now here's gonna be the hard part, right? And I've talked about this a lot. The hard part is when your kids catch you doing the very thing that you told them not to do. When you lose your temper, when you don't think before you speak, when you, don't take care of a responsibility after you've told them how important it is to be responsible. The question is what happens in that moment when your child brings this to your attention? Now they should do it respectfully. But when they do, your response to that is absolutely critical. Like I can't emphasize this enough. The moment I always harken back to, and it's not the only time, but it's one of the most, I think it illustrates the point the best, is I came home from work. I was tired. I was frustrated. I walk into the kitchen and my two youngest kids, my son and my daughter, Luke and Allie, they have made a mess. They have made a mess of the kitchen and I'm not having it, right? Like I've had too much to deal with today. I look at both of them like, I don't know what you're doing, but knock it off right now, clean this up and go to your room. And your room better be clean too, right? Like I was mad. I was on the rampage. And then I go upstairs and my daughter, Lily, my oldest, who I think at the time she was around 13, 14, knocks on my door and says, "Daddy, can I talk to you?" "Yeah, sweetheart, come on in. What's going on?" This is probably about 5 to 10 minutes after I just blown up, right? And she goes, "I don't think you handled that very well." Now, I'm a dude. I don't like to be wrong, right? Like, and I don't like to be questioned, or like in that sort of, especially when I've already had a rough day. And for some reason, like, and I always say that thereby by the grace of God go I, because for some reason in that moment, I was like, I'm going to choose not to be mad about this and I'm going to choose to be curious, right? Like, okay, what do you think I didn't handle well? And she goes, "Daddy, the reason why Luke and Allie were down there cooking something is because they got permission from mommy to make something for you. And they were very excited about doing this for you. And you didn't give them a chance to explain. You just yelled at them. And now they're both in their room and they're too scared to tell you why they were doing it." And I mean, you can imagine how you feel in that moment, right? You're wrong. You hurt the feelings of your two little kids who are just trying to do something nice for you. Your teenage daughter, your young teenage daughter had to bring this correction to you. And there's, for guys, my friend Brian Callen, who's a comedian, he brings this up. He goes, when guys have emotions, when that ball goes up in the throat, we turn it into humor or rage, right? And I'm sitting here at this moment going, she is absolutely right and I'm wrong. And I remember looking at her, I said, "Sweetheart, you're right. You are right and I am wrong," right? I verbalized that to her. I'm wrong. I messed this up. And I'm going to go apologize to them, but I want to thank you for having both the courage to do this and to do it so respectfully. And the reason why I think that moment was so formative, hopefully her, but I know it was for me as well, is because I had spent so much time, my wife and I had spent so much time telling our kids that there is right and there is wrong. And in that moment, if I had just gotten mad at her for bringing it to my attention, what I have told her is right and wrong is not objective. Right and wrong is not a matter of truth. Right and wrong is a matter of power and authority. And if you ever want your kids to be able to one day stand up to authority when it's wrong, then you have to actually reward that behavior when they do it correctly, respectfully, and they do it to you. And when someone asks me, like, what is the secret to try to raise your kids with good values in a way that they become their values? That's it. You have to model it. You have to not only explain it to them, you have to not only say it to them, you have to demonstrate it. And if they catch you screwing up, you have to own up to it. Because the moment you make right and wrong all about power and authority, that might work fine. Well, you're the power and authority. You love them, right? You love them. And even if you get it wrong, you still love them. You'd still die for that kid. But they're going to have a lot of power and authority in their life that not only would not die for them, not only doesn't love them, but might not like them, might be doing something horrible, might be doing something wrong. Is your kid going to have the courage to stand up to him? And the answer is they will if the convictions are theirs, but they have to believe it. And they believe it not only from hearing about it, not only from being convinced of it, but from having the opportunity to practice times of their life when they're smaller, when they don't have as much power, when they're a little bit more vulnerable, standing up and saying, I don't know how this is going to turn out for me, but I'm going to stand up and do the right thing because it's the right thing. And there is nobility and honor in that. And in our faith, that is how I honor God. I honor God by standing for the truth, even if it costs me something. So that would be my answer.
You know, another thing that I've heard through a lot of your content, and you brought it up a little bit in that story, which I absolutely love, this idea that, like, you know, we're eventually going to send our kids out into like a really, really treacherous world with a lot of, you know, potentially bad people, monsters, you call them in a lot of your videos. So some people would hear that and like would say like that you're painting it out to be, you know, much more dark, dramatic than maybe it needs to be. So can you go into that a little bit more and what it is that we're actually raising our kids to eventually go and have to face?
Sure. Let me tell you a story real quick. I got asked to speak at a graduation ceremony. And I always tell people, like, if you ask me to come and speak, you know what you're getting. All right. So like, just tell me, you asked me, man, you asked me.
This was your decision.
Yeah. You knew what this was. I was speaking to it was a small group of graduates, high school graduates. And I said, graduating high school is not just an academic achievement. It's kind of a rite of passage. It's an acknowledgement by kind of everyone that's here today that loves you, that's cared for you, that you are now about to enter into society as an adult. This is kind of one of those moments where effectively, legally, in many ways, you stop being a child and you start becoming a peer. So I'm going to treat you with the respect that comes from, and I'm going to be honest with you. I'm a father of 3. My oldest daughter just got married. My son graduated this year as well. My youngest daughter is, 16. From the moment I held my first child, I knew what my job was. My job was to try to make the world a better place for my children. And the truth is that it's not. That's the truth. It's not for lack of trying. It doesn't mean that everything's horrible, but as I look around at the world that these graduates are inheriting now compared to the one that I inherited, I think it is far less stable. I think there is a massive identity crisis that's taking place on an individual level, as well as a country level on who we are, basic questions about existence and reality that I never had to deal with as a child. They're having to contend with and have had to contend with. So the truth is, I don't think it's better. Having said that, I'm incredibly hopeful. And again, a lot of that's rooted in my faith. It's this idea. There's this. There's a verse in the New Testament that talks about the peace which surpasses all understanding. Now, that is an incredibly interesting way to word that, right? The peace which surpasses all understanding. It's not the peace that everyone gets because you're wealthy, you're prosperous, you're secure, you're fine. It's promising chaos, but then also promising peace along with it. And so a lot of the message that I try to send out when I talk to people, especially when I'm talking to fathers, is you have an obligation to prepare your child to go out into a world that will at times be hostile toward them. You have an obligation to protect them when they're young from people that are genuine monsters. And is everybody a monster? No, most people aren't monsters, but all of us are dealing with what I believe is a pretty messed up nature at times. And so the question is, are you protecting them during those formative years? Are you aware of what the threats are? Not so you can be constantly bringing up your child in fear, but so that you're developing them with the capabilities, the awareness, and the convictions so that they don't have to be afraid of the danger. They don't have to be afraid of the challenges out there. They see them as opportunities. So my message is not be afraid. No, my message is be aware and then develop the capabilities necessary so that you can be the sort of person that goes out there so that when there is danger, you're the one that runs toward the danger. You're not the one that runs away from it. You're the one that is willing to step up and say, for the sake of my family, for the sake of my children, for the sake of my community, my country, I will be willing and I will be capable to deal with the danger, to deal with the monsters, so that hopefully we live in a world where there's fewer of them. So I like people to be aware, but I don't want them to despair. I don't, not at all. Like, I don't want anybody to despair from the stuff that I'm talking about, because I don't despair. I get frustrated at times. I mean, I work in politics, man. You want to talk about frustration? Oh my God! I
could only imagine how frustrating that is. I can't even imagine, actually. I want to talk to you more about that.
The constant drumbeat of negativity within that area, and that I fall prey to as well, right? I'm not saying like everyone else is negative and I'm great. No, I get negative at times. I get frustrated. I get angry. I say things that I probably should have thought a little bit more about before I actually said. But ultimately, no, man, I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful because I believe that the things that we're discussing here are true, and I do believe they win in the end because people are willing to fight for them. And the bottom line is and look, I've been to combat. I'll tell you right now, man, the best warriors are the ones that are fighting for something they love, not fighting against something they hate. I've been in situations where I honestly thought to myself, man, that the next move I make could be the difference between me ever seeing my wife and children again. Right? The next move I make in this moment right now, this could be it. This could be it. And there's a part of you that can argue in your own mind and that's why you should walk away, man. Step back. Do you really got to do this? Does this really have to be done? Yes, it does. Because my wife believes I'm a good man, right? My children believe I'm a good man. They believe it. The question is it true? And what makes it true is when you do the hard things in those moments, even though you know it could cost you everything, because it's the right thing to do, because it's the honorable thing to do. So, man, I'm not, I get frustrated, but man, I do not despair.
Oh, Nick, raising two girls and a young man, your kids are a little bit older than mine. So I have a 13-year-old and a 10-year-old. And Gabe, actually,
they're a lot older than mine.
Yeah, Gabe's right in the middle of it.
A 20-month-old and a 3-month-old.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Those are, these are all fun times, man. These are all fun times.
That's the thing. They are, and they're all different, right? As the kids have gotten older, it's definitely obviously evolved and the conversations have changed. And I obviously, I adhere to a lot of things that you're discussing, especially with my son. And so my question for you is, having raised two girls and a son, when you talk about the role of a young man and in terms of physically being capable, but also just being emotionally capable, I'm curious how the difference you've seen as you've raised them, because I know for me with the 13-year-old and a 10-year-old, I have raised them probably different. And it's not to say that the morals aren't, those are the same, but it's the way that we talk about it. It's the role that I see them playing, especially physically. It's a little bit different. So how have you seen those roles kind of shift in raising a young man versus a young woman? And what have you done differently, I guess, is the way I would like to present that.
I think it's interesting. People will talk about well, why do you have to raise them differently? Why do we call it feminine and masculine? Because there's certain traits that are generally associated with femininity in women, and there's general traits that are generally associated with masculinity. Does that mean that there's women that can't demonstrate masculine traits? No, of course not. Of course there are. Are there not men that can demonstrate feminine traits? Yeah, of course, sure. But there's certain predispositions, and it is I think a perfectly ridiculous modern phenomenon to try to pretend like there's no substantive difference between men and women. I absolutely believe we have equal value. I do believe that there's different roles and responsibilities. And I think a lot of those are rooted in various obvious genetic differences between men and women. Things affect men and women differently. And what that means is that we tend to react to them differently. We tend to develop capabilities in different ways in order to be prepared for the things that we know are coming. And so, for instance, one of the biggest differences between men and women is how they motivate, right? So typically speaking, and again, you have to speak in certain generalities. Obviously, there's exceptions to the rule. I hope I've caveated this enough. Typically speaking, women are motivated when they feel encouraged and they feel like they have a community around them, when they feel safe within that environment. And so a lot of times when you see women motivate other women, it's like, you go girl, right? Slay queen. Like, oh, you look beautiful. You look great. Now watch men talk about each other, right? One of my favorite little memes is one where it shows a woman asking her friend, am I fat? Oh my gosh, no, you're beautiful. You're gorgeous. And then it shows a guy asking a guy, am I fat? He's like, dude, I got 5 fat friends and you're 4 of them, right? Like it's we motivate by like, hey, how about you get off your fat ass and go like do your job, man? Like, step up, like we're going to crush this. Let's do this thing. That's how we motivate. We motivate by, hey, there's a challenge and there's a dragon. Let's go slay it. Right. Let's go get it. So various differences like that kind of, I use that inform me like, okay, what am I preparing my daughters for? And what am I preparing my son for? Well, like you said, the values are the same, right? The values are the same, but there are different objectives. My daughters are, both of my daughters want to be mothers one day. Both of my daughters want to play the primary role in raising and educating their children. Okay. I have to help prepare them for that. My daughters wanted to, marry a man. I have to prepare them for what does it look like to find the sort of man that's going to truly love, respect, cherish, provide, and protect for you. My son wants to get married. My son wants to have kids. Like, okay, what is it like to be the sort of man that you can go out and you can find the sort of woman that you can actually build that family with that you want? And so all of them, we worked on developing them spiritually, emotionally, intellectually, physically, professionally. For my daughters, one of the things that, identified right off the bat is that a lot of times men always complain about this, right? In part because it's frustrating to us. If somebody wants to come and say, hey, I got a problem, it's like, cool, what's the problem and how do I help fix it? And I remember getting frustrated with my wife early on in marriage sometimes where she would be talking about something, but she didn't want me to help fix the problem. And what I realized early on was, well, no, it's because she's trying to identify all the different emotions that she has associated with this event that took place. And she's trying to properly analyze it from various angles. And the way I solve her problem in that moment is not by trying to come up with quick solutions when I don't even understand all the data or all the factors that are playing into this, maybe relational issue or whatever it is. The way I solve her problem is by listening to her, like intentionally listening, not just sitting there and being like, yep, oh yeah, no, yeah, you're right. No. She's investigating something. She wants somebody to talk through and to work through that investigation to figure out all the various factors in play. Because one of the things I have recognized is that a lot of times when men are like, oh, women are so emotional. Yes, women tend to have more emotional connections to events and relationships and places and things than men do. But you want to know what? It's one of the reasons why they can remember stuff so well. Because when you assign an emotion to a particular memory or a particular place or event or thing, the recall can be incredibly good. Not to mention the fact that my wife has picked up on micro signals that I have totally missed. Why? Because she's in tune to the emotional narrative that is going on within a situation in an area I'm not, right? I may be guys, we go into it, threat, non-threat. Non-threat, we can kind of shut down on the emotional side and now we're just existing, right? Because women by nature are more physically vulnerable, they're more in tune to identifying threats. And those threats are not just physical. Sometimes they're character related. Sometimes they're picking up on what someone said or a look that they made. And I have learned the hard way. You ignore your wife's discernment at your own peril, because a lot of times she is picking up on things. And so some of this is about going through and appreciating that my girls have certain predispositions with respect to how they interact with reality that I'm not as aware of. And if I take the time to listen to them and let them explain it, I learned something from that. I also wanted my daughters to always know that I was there for them. Like I was ultimately their ride or die, right? Like no matter what happened, they could call me up at 2:00 in the morning. Now, first of all, you better not be out at 2:00 in the morning. But if something happened, They never had to be afraid to call me, right? They always knew that I represented safety to them. And that doesn't start off when they're teenagers. You'll see fathers that'll do this where it's like, oh, I'll kill any of the boyfriends. I'll do any of this. Okay, great. But where were you when she was 20 months old? Where were you when she was 3? Where were you when she was 6? Where were you when you were 9? Were you spending the time to make that emotional connection with her? Because again, if she is picking up on the emotional narrative behind everything, are you someone that represented a safe harbor in the storm for her, even when she was little? Because that's when those habits really start to develop. That's when they start to pick up on a lot of those cues. What cues did they pick up with you, Dad? Right? Were you the guy that was safe? Were you the guy that she could go to? Were you the guy that would pick her up and hold her when she hurt herself or when she was scared? Or did you dismiss her because you were tired and because you had to go to work early in the morning and you don't want to deal with that nonsense? There is no monster under the bed. Right? So develop that relationship. And what ends up happening is that as your girls get older, and now you really want them to come to you for advice, you really want them to trust you for advice, they will, because they saw you as someone that would sit down and take the time to talk and explain and to listen and to understand. Because that is not that tendency to see the emotional narrative behind things that can either be a liability or it could be a superpower, right? It can either be honed into very, very good discernment about her surroundings and her situations and where she's in and identifying traits or potential red flags in somebody that may want to be her husband one day. Or it can be something where she just feels terrified and ruled by her emotions. So the father plays a huge role in actually developing that. With my son, this is another thing that's really important for dads to understand. I see dads do this all the time, and I saw it in the military where when it was their teenage daughter, it was like, nobody better lay a hand on my little girl. You better be home by 10. These are the rules. You're not going to kiss a boy. Or you're not going to, do any of this stuff. But with their sons, it was like, yeah, hey man, go out and, do your thing. Just use protection. Dude, if you do that, you're a crap father, man. I'm going to tell you right now, you are training your son to be the sort of man you tell your daughter to avoid. The rules have to apply the same. And so we had very similar rules. So the same rules for our son and our daughters when it came to things like dating and relationships and all those other things. But one of the things that we tried to develop in my son as well is like, your job is to protect and provide. So for instance, and I keep going back to dating for right now, probably because it's kind of the era of life I'm in, but, and it's also because the era that a lot of parents get nervous about and feel like the most disconnected from their kids when they start forming relationships outside. It's
super relatable for me, so I appreciate it.
With my son, one of the biggest things it was, there are certain things that if you are not ready to be a father, if you are not ready to actually take care of somebody, then you don't do certain things. And that sounds like bizarre in today's era where they're like, oh yeah, go out, have fun, do whatever, use protection, get an abortion, whatever. No. We told our kid, it's like, you will respect that young woman. Even if she wants to, you won't, because you will respect her. Because if you're not ready to actually fulfill that role to protect, to provide both for her, for any children that you make, then you're not doing that. Because as a man, we take care of our responsibilities. We honor our commitments and we protect. And how are you going to effectively protect and provide for somebody if you're not willing to actually deal with the responsibilities of doing this other stuff out here that's oh so fun? Now, a part of that you can argue is practical. Right? Oh yeah, you're telling your son don't make bad decisions that could potentially impact you and somebody else for the rest of their life. No, but you're also teaching them this is not what a man does, because a man protects and provides. And in order to protect and provide, you must be responsible. You must be looking ahead beyond what your own, desires are in that one individual moment to what is the larger implication of this and how do I do the honorable thing in this situation? So I would say that, again, when they're really little, it's all about time. It's all about time with them. It's all about that connection. When kids are very little, they desperately need time with their parents. And unfortunately, we're growing up in an era where more and more parents are encouraged at a young age to like cart them off to daycare, cart them off to, because they need that educational development. No, they need you. That's what they need right there. They need you. There are so many more studies coming out now confirming what I think we already should have known, which is, if you don't want your kid to have this sort of disassociation with their parents or this lack of connection with their parents, well, then you can't start sending them away as soon as they leave the womb, right? They need that time to build that emotional connection with you, that intellectual connection with you. So build that a lot when they're very young. And then engage in the intellectual as they start to become older. Explain to it, like, because mommy and daddy said so might be fine when they're 3. It's not fine when they're 10, right? Unless it's in a dangerous situation where, like, I'm telling you right now, do this right now, come with me. Explain it to them, because you want to have that conversation and you want them to start to go through this thought process of understanding stuff. And you want them to see mom and dad as someone they can go to have those conversations, to ask those questions, to work through that, because they know that they're going to get good answers from mom and dad because you love them and because you're willing to actually have the conversations and take the time. And then when they start to get into those teenage years and they start to become more independent, you're not seen as some distant parent that they see for 30 minutes around the dinner table at night. You're someone that's played an active role in helping them work through these decisions. The other thing I would say, and I know I've been kind of all over the place, the other thing I would say is that you have to, I'll put it this way. My job as a parent is to, at some ages, you're sheltering your children, right? You're legitimately doing that because they don't have the cognitive ability or whatever it is in order to properly navigate, right? Because again, they'll play in the street. As they get a little bit older, though, I always said that my goal is to prevent them from having scars, not bruises. They need to be able to go out there and start to apply some of the things that you've taught them. They need to find challenges to overcome, and they need to be age-appropriate challenges, but they need to be ones where they can potentially fail and learn how to deal with failure and then get up and do it again. And that's going to include them sometimes. That's going to include bumps and scrapes, physically, emotionally, intellectually, but they need to be able to do that. But when they do, they also need to be able to come back to you and be like, okay, how do I improve? How do I get better? What do I do next? How do I navigate this better in the future? That's the sort of relationship that you want. And so I always made sure that all of my kids felt loved, but I also wanted them at a certain age to start to feel my respect. And as we all know the difference, you can love without respecting. I can love my children regardless, right? I can love my children regardless of the decisions that they make. I may be very upset with them if they made a bad one, but I love them regardless. Respect has to be earned. It cannot be given unconditionally. Respect is by definition conditional. And so how does someone actually develop respect? By competence, by grit, by determination, by perseverance, by resilience. And so as your kids start to get older, you have to allow them chances to be able to build those things, knowing that sometimes they'll fail. Then they come back to you. They learn a little bit more. They go out, they try again. And then you reward that resilience and that perseverance and that capability with your respect.
I always, and I've said this many times, I feel like I am so fortunate to obviously co-host this podcast, but I hope that more young parents like that are just starting can listen to this stuff, because just being aware of some of the things that you're talking about and other guests this early in the process, because like you were saying, it starts now, right? Like you can't wait for the teenage years to like start playing this role because now dating is an issue and whatever. Like it all kind of starts now. One question I did have though is, we've made several decisions to put us in this position where, we're very fortunate, but we've kind of intentionally set it up so that, my wife is going to be the primary, caretaker, and we're fully planning a homeschool unless that changes. I'm very fortunate that like this is my office and I get to do everything here, but like I'm a short walk away from home, so I get to see them. There's no commute time. But for a lot of people, a lot of that stuff isn't realistic, or they would say it isn't realistic. What would you say to people that are like, hey Nick, this all sounds great, but like we both have to work. Like I have to get back to work 6 weeks after, like daycare is the only option. What kind of is the suggestion there? Or is that just kind of like a bigger systemic problem that just kind of needs to get fixed through, policy and kind of that side of stuff?
Part of it is, I mean, look, when your government is engaging in or when your government is engaging in inflationary monetary policy, it's going to have a negative impact on the economy, right? Like I get that. Here's what I would ask people to understand is that this is somewhat of an either or proposition. I wish it wasn't, but it is somewhat of an either or proposition. Your kids are going to be raised. It just depends on what sort of role you decide to play in that. Now, if you both have to work, like legitimately both have to work, because can we be honest about something? This is going to piss some people off. there are a lot of situations where I hear people say that where it's not true. Both people have to work in order to prioritize the lifestyle they have chosen. Okay. So for those people who are like, look, dude, I will be homeless if we don't work. I get it. I'm not talking to you when I say that. I get it. But for the people that are like, well, I really like the 3,500 square foot home, and we really like having the two really nice cars that are each, $70,000. No, you don't have to do this. You've chosen to do that. You have prioritized maybe the bigger house. You've maybe prioritized the nice vacation every year. You've maybe prioritized the cars, the jewelry, the clothes. You have prioritized that over this other thing. Now, maybe you think, well, the public school that we have is great, or the private school we send them to is great. And it might be, right? Like, I'm not telling you have to homeschool like we did. I'm not telling you have to do it this way. What I am saying is someone is going to raise your kids. How active do you want to be in that process? My wife and I, and look, please understand, my wife and I both came from broken homes. When we got married, I was 19, she was 20. I was a private in the military. We made like no money. She worked at Old Navy. Right. It's not like we had a silver spoon in our mouth or anything like that. When we started having kids, I was the sole income, because that's what we talked about when we were dating. And we said, look, my goal as a man is to make enough money to where you don't have to work outside the home if you don't want to, especially when we start having kids. What that means is that we didn't, like, to this day, like, we don't live in a fancy house. It's funny. Sometimes people are like, oh, is their house really nice? When people come over, it's nope. Right? We love it. It works for us, but we don't have a bunch of fancy cars. We don't have a bunch of fancy jewelry. We don't have a big fancy house. We don't have things like that. Could we have gotten more of that if Tina had worked outside of the house? Sure. I will say this. I see a lot of couples where the wife works outside the house, and when you add everything up, she's probably only making maybe an extra $1,000 a month, because when you look at the additional clothes that are needed, the eating out, the cars, the daycare expenses, everything else, and then you look at the salary that she's making, it's like, was that worth it for what you lost? And that's all I want people to understand, is that a trade-off is taking place. A trade-off is taking place. You need to decide for yourself what it is that you want to prioritize. Now, here's what I can tell you. I know people that dual income, they made certain decisions. Their kid went off to school or maybe daycare, and their kid's awesome, right? And they've got a great relationship with their kid, and it all worked out. And that's usually because, in addition to working 40 hours a week or 50 hours a week, they were very, very disciplined in the amount of time they spent doing homework with their kids, or going out and spending time on the weekends, or, going to school events. And it took a lot out of them. Right? It took a lot out of him to be that present despite all the work requirements. And if you can do both, hey, right? Like, all I'm just saying is that if you start to, I'll leave it here. I have a 21-year-old, I have an 18-year-old, I have a 16-year-old. I like hanging out with all of them. When I hear parents tell me, oh my gosh, the teenage years, nothing is more funny to me when I talk about how much I have a great relationship with my kids, and they're like, oh, wait until they're teenagers. You're like, I have 3 teenagers in the same house, because they just assume that you must not know what that's like, because obviously everybody goes through this experience with their teenagers. I didn't. I want to be friends with all my kids. I want them to live close. I want to spend time with them. I don't understand the idea of, oh, I can't wait for the school year to start off so I can get these kids out of the house. Right? I'm sorry. I don't get it. I don't understand it. Maybe part of the reason why you have such a hard time with your kids into the house is because the environment that you're sending into is turning them into sort of the people you don't want to hang out with. You don't want to be friends with. Maybe it's worth considering that. Maybe that's the reason why there's this disconnect, or this generational gap, or whatever else you're using as an excuse to say, I don't like my kids, right? I love them, but I don't like them, right? Maybe that has something to do with it. So all I would say is determine your priorities, do your best to be in the financial position that you can be, or to live at the level that would be necessary in order to provide you the maximum amount of time with your children and their education and their development. Right. And if you find yourself in a situation where financially you just can't do it, all I'm telling you is you're going to have to work harder then. That's what that means. You're going to have to work harder, because you're effectively getting less time with them. And again, I don't mean to tell anybody that you have to do it the way I did it. What I'm saying is the time's important. That's the non-negotiable, right? The time's important. You have to invest it. So whether you want to invest it on top of the 50 to 60 hour work week, or whether you want to make adjustments within your lifestyle, if that's possible, to say, we're going to prioritize this time over here because we believe the dividends with respect to our relationship, our family, our work-life balance will be better as a result. And all I will say is that at this stage in my life, there's a lot of things that we missed out on in order to make the decisions we did. And if you list all of those things off, I can't think of anyone that I would trade the relationship that I have with my children for that thing. So,
Nick, you met your wife early. You guys got married early. I'm in a similar, camp. What role does that relationship play, and how are you intentional in showing it to the kids? Like, in particular, your daughters. So, for me, there's certain things that I do. I am a certain way with my wife, right? I am who I am, but I just kind of, I think that's okay to show in front of the kids, like the way that I show her affection and love and care. Obviously nothing weird, but it's like, what are you doing to intentionally demonstrate to your children the values of a relationship? And then how are you and your wife over the years, right, getting married at such a young age? Is there anything intentional that you guys are doing to maintain and grow your relationship? And then how does that show off to the kids?
Yeah. Your kids are learning from your marriage. Your kids are building their expectation for their own marriage by watching yours, watching how you interact, watching how you speak to one another, how you treat one another, how you problem solve together. I had somebody ask me, like, do you argue in front of your kids? I'm like, yeah, sometimes. Like, ooh, I don't think you should do that. I'm like, okay, well, do you want your kids to believe that you never argue, or do you want your kids to believe that if you argue in front of them, something's really bad? Now there are times where it is appropriate for you and mommy to just have a conversation by yourselves, right, without the kids there. There are topics which you should discuss, in private and apart from them. But I wouldn't say we intentionally argued in front of our children. What I would say is that there were many times where we intentionally did not leave the room in order to have the argument. One, because it's important for them to understand that couples argue and that there's a proper way to do it. Because ultimately, my job is not to beat my wife in an argument. Her job is not to beat me in an argument. Our job is to figure out what is the best course of action for our marriage. What is the best course of action for our children, our family? My job as her husband is to prioritize her safety and her needs above my own. And again, some people don't like to hear that. I'm sorry, I believe it's true. And so I try to make sure that what my daughters see in the way I treat their mother is someone who loves their mother, who has her back, who is compassionate and kind to her, but who is not a pushover. I'll say right now, this whole thing, happy wife, happy life, is a great moniker if you want to have a crappy marriage. It really is. I hate that phrase, because what it ends up telling people, and what it ends up suggesting to young men, is that if you think your wife is wrong, it's not worth having a discussion or an argument with her. Just tell her she's right so you can move on with your life. I don't treat my wife like a child. If her and I disagree, we have a discussion about it, because we want to both want to arrive at truth together. We want to arrive at a decision or a course of action that we're both invested in. And so I don't treat my wife like a child to be placated. I treat her like the woman I love. And so the words I use, I choose carefully. My wife once said this when we were having a pretty big fight early on in our marriage. She goes, "I need you to talk to me like I'm the woman that you love." I said, "You know what? Okay, that's fair. That's fair. And I need you to not condescend to me, because respect is important." And we both appreciated that. And so, yeah, we will argue, and sometimes we'll argue passionately, but you know what my kids know? We never call each other names. We don't try to be rude or condescending to one another. We may passionately debate something, but it's because they both know that mom and dad are on the same side, and we want to fully be in the same side, not just emotionally, but in the way we're thinking about a particular topic. And I also want them to know that an argument doesn't mean the marriage is over. Like I can honestly tell you right now, I don't believe our kids have ever experienced a time where they're like, "Oh my gosh, I don't know if mom and dad are going to make it." That thought is so foreign. Like, we don't say things to each other. We don't treat each other. We don't act. We don't, storm out, and I don't drive away. I don't sleep on the couch. That's another one I want to tell you. I don't sleep on the couch. Tina and I have been pretty mad at each other. No, that's my bed. That's our bed. And I'm going to have my place in it. That's not me being a jerk. That's me asserting that, no, baby, there's never going to be that separation between you and I where anybody, to include, especially you, is ever going to wonder if I'm coming back. That's not a thing, man. When we got married, we burned the ships, dude. It is her and I. That's it. And I think that's been reflected in the way that we treat each other. And so our kids have that expectation that to be married means to make a commitment to another human being for life. And when we say better or for worse, we mean it. And I think that's an important component. The other thing I will say is that, and again, I'm sorry, I share a lot of stories, but I just think they're good at illustrating principles. Again, we did not have a rough time in the teenage years. That doesn't mean we didn't have any, bad moments. But I'll never forget, my oldest daughter, she was butting heads with Tina a little bit when she was a young teenager, and she was frustrated, and they were having a hard time communicating with one another in a way to where they both understood what was going on and in each other's perspective. And, I'm coming down the hallway, and Lily leaves the room, and she doesn't see me there. And she just makes this face at her mom that, Tina doesn't see. And I remember stopping her, and very calmly, I looked at her. I said, don't you ever do that to my wife again. Right? Not your mother, my wife. Don't you ever do that to my wife again. Do you understand me? You will not disrespect my wife. Okay, Daddy. Right. I wanted her to understand that wasn't meant to be some sort of like mean power play or scary thing for my daughter. What it was to illustrate to her that I love her and I respect her, and she is worthy of respect, and she will get it as long as I'm here. Right? I will ensure that she is respected. I also wanted her to expect that from her husband one day, that, we don't sit here and take the side of the kids in these arguments. No. We have our spouses back. So that is, I can't emphasize how critical that is. Kids that believe. Here's another thing too. I flirt with my wife all the time. Right. And I do it, and I do it in front of the kids. Right. And they're like, ew, gross,
Yeah.
I remember somebody a while back, one of my kids came up to me and they said, I wish my parents flirted the way that yours does, because they're going to say ew, they're going to say gross, the whole deal. Man, nothing provides a kid more security than seeing how much mom and dad love each other. Right. They just, that fills them with a sense of not only like kind of joy, but security as well. Because if mom and dad are good, then the family feels safe. The family feels secure. They feel like no matter what happens, it's going to be okay, because look, mom and dad love each other, and mom and dad are together, and mom and dad are going to protect us, and mom and dad are going to protect each other. And so, your kids are learning everything from the way you argue with your spouse, from the way you work out things to your spouse, from the way you flirt with your spouse. You're building expectations in them of what a healthy relationship looks like, what a healthy family looks like. And the good news with all of this is that, look, so much of this is actually fun. It's not a grind. It's not hard work. It's not having to, what do I do now? What's the perfect thing? Half the battle's showing up. And then getting joy out of the time that you get to spend, with your kids, with your spouse, with your family.
Man, we got married. We said, burn the ships.
I know
that might be the line of the podcast, man.
That's the clip.
Dude, I appreciate all this. I know we're coming up on the hour, but the other thing that I had to bring up before we went off, because I was watching a couple different videos of you, prepping for this podcast, and I really, really appreciated the things that all dads should say to their daughters. And I was watching this on my laptop in the kitchen with my 3-month-old daughter, like strapped to my chest, because my wife is working out in the morning. And I'd be lying to you if I said I didn't get emotional listening to it, with like this just like beautiful, like just new baby girl, like literally sleeping on me. But what you brought up, the story you brought up, and maybe you can retell it here really quick, of why it's so important to say I love you constantly to your daughter. And you brought up the story of, I think he was a roommate. Yeah, you know what I'm talking about.
I know exactly what you're talking about.
Like that to me, just like, man, Anyway, I had a moment with my daughter in the kitchen watching the video.
Yeah. I shared this story on an Instagram reel, and it kind of took off, and it inspired us to have like kind of a longer conversation about it. I always tell dads, make sure you tell your daughter you love them. And whenever I say that, people are like, well, you got to show them too. It's not good enough. Just say yeah, thank you. I get that. A lot of time men think that when we protect, when we provide, when we sacrifice, that's how we demonstrate love. And you know what? It's true. That's accurate. And it's a very important and critical way that we demonstrate love. But your daughters also need to hear it. Your son does too. We actually have another video coming out, I think this Saturday, on things you need to say to your sons as well. But the reason why I think this is so important is that when I was in the military, I had a buddy of mine who I describe as a complete man whore. This dude was a player, man. It was one of those things where it was both incredible and horrifying to see this guy operate, because women just threw themselves at him. And I remember asking him, like, dude, I had, Lily at the time, my oldest daughter, she was little. I said, how do I protect my daughter from a guy like you? And he was like, you better tell her that you love her. And think about that for a second, because a part of you as a father is like, oh, you son of a, like, he goes, and really what it came down to is tell your daughter you love her, because if you don't, someone who doesn't will, and they'll believe them, because they want that. They need that feeling of love and security. And you are the first man in their life that is supposed to be dedicated to providing that and protecting them and laying down your life for them if necessary. But if you think that your daughter has experienced love simply because she has a roof over her head, food and clothing, and I'm telling you right now, she hasn't. You give your pet that, right? No, your daughter needs to know on an emotional level that you love her. And verbalizing it is very important. The way you demonstrate it too is from the time that you spend, and a lot of it is when they're little, it's being goofy, man. I have worn the tiara and drank lemonade that I don't know what it was made out of, but there wasn't a single dang lemon in there. But that's what she described it as when she handed it to me at 3 years old, right? And she had made it. So I'm sitting here drinking it with a tiara and a feather boa, and we're, playing games and, chasing through the house and the whole deal. And, but there's another way that I have shown my daughters that, I love them. And that is they get a tenderness from me that nobody else in the world does. And they know it, right? My oldest daughter, my youngest daughter, I always tease my youngest daughter. She can talk me into anything. I'm allergic to cats. We have two, right? Because I love to see my little girl smile. Right. And then my oldest daughter, when she got married, she wouldn't tell me what song she was doing for the daddy-daughter dance. She wouldn't tell me. And I knew it's because, she wants to see daddy's reaction. But I knew it was going to be one of two songs. It was either going to be Butterfly Kisses or Cinderella. And so when the dance starts at her wedding, and they start to play Cinderella, I'm like, I'm going to keep it together, because I trained for this, right? I mentally prepared for it. And she said, Daddy, gosh dang, I'm going to get choked up again. She goes, Daddy, the reason why I chose this song was we played it at every daddy-daughter dance we went to since I was a little girl. And I knew I would pick it one day for this day. Oh, damn. And she goes, you did a good job, Daddy. I freaking lost it, man. Like, it was straight up ugly crying, head on her shoulder. Like I just couldn't hold it back. Right. But, and I'm a dude that I'm a guy that's like, when it's like, oh, it's okay for men to cry. Yeah. Under 3 conditions, somebody dies, right? Whatever. That's when it's okay to cry. But that was my girls know that, Daddy doesn't cry. Right. I don't cry. I try to keep my emotions under control. I try to not show weakness or vulnerability. And I remember my wife telling me, this is also a big part of the secret of being a good father is having a good wife. I'll tell you that much right now, because they're going to give you all kinds of important insight if you take the time to listen to them. But she said, Nick, they don't need to see weakness. They need to see tenderness. And man, is it true. Is it true? And look, as a dad, if you're invested, if you are spending the time, you're not going to be able to help it, man. You're not going to be able to help it. There is something about, I always tell, look, I'll list off my badass credentials, right? Army, paratrooper, Green Beret, Ranger, sniper. Like, you find out, you think you're a tough guy until you have a little girl, and then you find out what a sap you are. You find out what a sap you are. So I would just say that you have to verbalize both to you. And again, I tell my son I love him too, right? I don't want to exclude the boys from here, but show your little girl that you love her with the time and the emotional investment, but for the love of God, verbalize it. Tell her you love her. Because what you are doing is you are helping her distinguish between the fraudulent and the genuine article. And if you're the sort of dad that the only way that you educate your daughter on what genuine love is by telling her that guy's a piece of crap, or that's a jerk, or don't do this, or don't do that. If all you've done is shown her the fraudulent, well, there's 1,000 different ways. There's 1,000 different ways a man could mask the fraudulent and make it look genuine, unless she's experienced the genuine article through that genuine love of a father that will die for her. And when she gets a taste of that, she will demand it out of the man that she one day marries. And I am very blessed that my daughter did do that, and that she found a guy that represents those things. And there is no greater feeling of relief that when your daughter has chosen a man, she's chosen a good one, that will protect and provide for her, and that they will grow together. Like I said, relief, it's a wonderful feeling, because man, you just want the best for them, and you want to protect them, and you know that one day somebody else is going to have to fill that role. You'll always be there for as long as you can, but one day you won't be there. And you want them to, you want to have provided a good enough example to where they can spot it in the guy they're going to marry.
Man, I couldn't imagine that emotion that you feel when she says you did a good job. I mean, I feel like that's like that's like the highlight of a life. You know what I mean? Like, that's exactly what you want your kids to say at some point in time, right? When they're old enough to really understand. That's powerful. I really appreciate you sharing that.
Oh yeah, no, it is. It's for anybody that's wondering, I'm telling you right now, it is a feeling I would crawl through broken glass for. It is just because, and look, I know all the things that I should have done better and could have done better and whatnot, but in the end, that's, I can't think of anything we ever had to give up, fight for, sacrifice or whatnot that wouldn't be worth having that relationship with your children.
Man. Well, Gabe, this has been a great conversation. Nick, this has been an awesome conversation. We want to be sensitive of your time, man. I really wanted to get into some of the politics side about being part of the House of Delegates. Like, just real quick, like, where are we at right now as a country?
Really quick. No, I can make this super quick. We're talking about all the things you're not supposed to, right? Religion, politics.
30-second clip.
No, I'll put it this way. I think our country is going through some pretty difficult times right now. I think everyone, regardless of where you are on the political spectrum, kind of feels that on one way or another. The country would not be in the condition it is if families were in better condition. Families would be in better condition if men were taking, and that's not to say that women don't have a responsibility too. They do. I think a lot of young men are being tired of being told that it's all their fault and all their responsibility. It's both. But if you want to have one of the greatest impact, like if you're concerned about the direction of the country, the first thing you should be asking is, what's the direction of your family? Because I will tell you right now, there are things that I can look at in my life from a professional standpoint. There are things that I can look at. I can apologize. I'm an elected official, right? I've gotten legislation passed. I've been at bill signings. I have governors, pins for, and that's great. But the legacy I'm going to leave behind is going to be represented in my children. People are going to forget I ever served in office. Most of the people that follow me on social media have no idea I currently serve in office. So don't ignore politics. but don't become so obsessed with it. Don't become obsessed with it at the expense of your family. Don't become so obsessed with things that you have very little control over that you give up on the things for which you have a great deal of control over, because that's what's going to do it. America is not a system of government. The system of government is a part of who we are. It's an important part, but we're a people first. So I guess ask yourself, what sort of people are you raising? And if you focus the appropriate amount of time there, that will do far more to save the country than anything a politician's going to do.
Well, on that note, Nick, where's the best place, if people want to know more about what you have going on, your YouTube, your social? I mean, I know Gabe and I love your content. The what? The mugs. Yeah, dude. What's the next mug that's coming out? But
we made it easy. It's Nick J Freitas. If you type anything close to that in Google, usually our YouTube, our Instagram, like all of Rumble, everything is Nick J Freitas. We have a twice a week podcast we do called Making the Argument. Jason, you were on that one earlier, so that'll be coming out here later in August. We also have another show we do called the Y Minutes. But if you go to Nick J Freitas on YouTube, you can find everything else. And if you do want our mugs, we have a link in our link tree to only mugs. So we got only mugs with a Z. Takes you to the kind of our shop where we have a lot of the coffee mugs that I little witty coffee mugs and stuff on. My favorite one that we do is I have a coffee mug that says my wife is hotter than my coffee. So that's one of our best sellers there. But yeah,
and I saw now it's like a spouse one. There's like a my husband is hotter than my coffee. I was actually gonna get that one.
It was funny because I had one. My wife is hotter than my coffee, and so for Valentine's Day, we had another one made that was my husband is hotter than my coffee, and we did it. Tina and I did a reel of it together. So I've got my coffee, and Tina comes out, and she has her mug, and she swishes the coffee around, and the ice clinks, and I'm like, "You got iced coffee?" And she goes, "Well, technically, it's still true." Like, so yeah.
Well, guys, I really appreciate everyone listening. Go back, check out the other episodes. I know this episode is just packed. If you got, value from it, which I know you did, because I know we did, just share it with a friend, leave the podcast a rating and review, and make sure to check out everything that Nick has going on, especially those mugs, and keep training hard.